It used to be, oh, well, you know, trans people don't exist. Just because you change your name, your pronouns, and wear different clothing, like, that doesn't mean you're a woman or a man. Now you have medical intervention, where with HRT, you can actually start to pass a lot better outside of your genetics. So it's like, oh, well, now people can, like, look like it, so we're passing a little bit better. So, like, then it moved to, okay, well, you can't be a woman because you don't have a vagina. So it's like, okay, well, now we have vaginoplasty and phalloplasty. So what now? Oh, well, you don't have a womb. Now we're seeing articles about potential womb transplants being possible. It's like, okay, well, you don't have a woman's soul. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a bold empirical claim. Do you have a source that you can cite? And of course they don't. So it's like, okay, well, then what now? Well, if you've gotten a vaginoplasty, if you've gotten a transplant womb, you've been on HRT, blah, 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 blah. What about your chromosomes? Well, if science finds a way to change your chromosomes, well, then what then? You don't have a fucking woman's soul. You don't have a man's soul. It'll never stop. It does not end. Well, I don't know, Tony. What makes you think that Crowder is just a grifter and the rest are evil? Because, like, it is true. There's, like, I think, was it, like, Piers Morgan said some weird shit about Crowder? Like, Crowder behind the scenes. Crowder himself has admitted he had a bisexual phase. He cross-dresses all the time. As a joke, of course. He was literally a theater kid. Like, he was quite literally a theater kid. He still is, to an extent. So, like, the dude's a bit fruity, obviously. Oh, was it Gutfeld? Oh, yeah, it was Gutfeld, not Piers Morgan. Sorry, I got my reprehensible cretins mixed up. My bad. It's been known to happen. But, like, you could say the same about Ben Shapiro, right? Like, Ben Shapiro's also a failed artist. He was a failed a playwright or whatever, which is not a profession that is seen to be turbo conservative, you know? There's other failed artists as well. Like, Michael Knowles is also a failed theater kid turned conservative grifter. There seems to be a long historic trend of failed artists becoming extreme far-right ideologues. You know, there's some Austrian guy in the 30s and 40s that comes to mind as well, you know. So this is the take, and this is what's unfortunate because of how widespread this seems to be in the conservative movement. If you are willing to label all LGBTQIA plus people and their allies as so-called groomers, child abusers, etc., you're essentially marking them for death. Like, let's just be honest here. All the time, when they talk about people who abuse kids or whatever, they reference killing those people as punishment for the crime. So if you're, with no evidence, labeling an entire marginalized group as that, like, the pieces of the puzzle are available to be put together. Yeah, like, it was back, like, when the Proud Boys harassed a drag queen story hour, and one of them showed up with a, quote, kill your local pedophile shirt, unquote. And then they went there and called the drag queen that was reading stories to kids a pedophile. So, like, the intent is pretty clear in that instance. Jesus Christ. So, like, I don't think the average conservative opinion on queer people is, like, the wholesale eradication of them, like some of the more far-right ideologues. But they're very close, and that's the point. They've been radicalized by all this rhetoric. They are literally, like, a light shove away from being like, oh, well, I'm not one of those people, so whatever. It's happening to those people, it's not happening to me. They're certainly not going to have the stones to try to defend those people, the LGBT people in that instance. I'm old enough to remember when the standard conservative position on gay people was that they shouldn't have the right to marry, but also like, oh, well, if you, whatever you're doing behind closed doors, I don't give a shit, just don't shove it down my throat or whatever, right? That's still hateful rhetoric, and it's still somewhat dehumanizing, but not nearly as dehumanizing as the standard conservative line on queer people nowadays. At least that was publicly talked about. Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about their public rhetoric. They were much more measured in what they were saying, and now they're just open about it. That their intent is eliminationist. Because, like, the same moral panic we're seeing now, like, literally them calling all LGBT people and their allies groomers and whatnot, labeling them child abusers and shit. That was used against gay men in the past. It's the same shit. It's recycled bigotry. It's just being used against, targeted against trans people, but used against all queer people broadly. There's just a different dimension to it now, right? That dimension being, if you're gay, lesbian, bi, whatever, there's usually not much medical intervention involved in that process. So if a child is gay, lesbian, bi, whatever, there's no medical intervention, so it's like, well, XYZ, you're not raising your kids right, how could a kid ever be that, blah, 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 blah. Why are you sexualizing kids even though they seem to forget that you can have crushes on other people in your class as a kid? Like, that's a thing that happens, and it's not sexual at all, and if you suggest that it is, then you're fucking weird. Like, you're sexualizing romance in that instance. Or, like, whatever it would be. Like, I don't know if romance is the best term, but you know what I mean. But now, because the focus is on trans people, usually when you're talking about a trans person, not only does it involve a social element of social transition, using a different name, wearing, you know, gender non-conforming clothes in the eyes of society, etc., using different pronouns, etc., like that is still going to be facing a lot of pushback from conservatives, but there's also medical intervention with trans people typically. When it comes to adults, people will have medical procedures like prescriptions of hormone replacement therapy. There will also be potentially surgeries for whatever the fuck you're doing. And once you apply that to the fact that kids can indeed be trans, that's where you get all this rhetoric about it being child abuse, because they're like mutilating and castrating kids, chopping them up. And it also allows them to legislate against trans existence with more plausible deniability. Because before it was purely social. It's not really easy to legislate gay people out of existence in the same way that it's possible to legislate trans people out of existence. Because to be trans necessitates, at least for the best quality of life for the trans person, medical intervention. And of course, like, children are not getting fucking gender-affirming surgeries. And, like, they're being put on fucking puberty blockers while they go through the, you know, they interface with medical and mental health professionals, their parents themselves, over a period of years before they're, you know, while they're on the puberty blockers. They find out if they're trans or not, go through with HRT after that, or just get off the puberty blocker, have a late puberty, which happens all the time naturally, with virtually zero negative side effects. Like, you can legislate trans people out of existence in that way by restricting access to medical intervention. You can't really do that against gay people. So that's the different dimension we're seeing when it comes to the current threat to queer people that's being posed. And of course, that's a big threat against trans people, but it's also a big threat against all queer people. Because lumped into a lot of these bills isn't just anti-trans shit. It's anti-queer broadly. Like banning drag, for instance. Or banning books from school. They just use the anti-trans hysteria as the justification, as the nudge to accept all the other bigotry. Because bigotry is intersectional. We talk about, you know, intersectionalism when it comes to fighting oppression. But inherent to that is that oppression is also intersectional. The ways people are oppressed overlap dramatically, even if you're not part of the identity that's being targeted in one way. It still applies to you. So that's the difference. I'm old enough to remember when the standard public talking point of a Republican, of a conservative, when it came to gay people was, okay, well, don't do it around me or whatever. And also, you can't get married. Which is dehumanizing, and it's meant to exclude people, gay people, from a service that people can normally get in heterosexual relationships, which is an element of dehumanization, or have kids, yeah. But it's not like you're making it so that they cannot exist. Of course, that's always been the goal. Conservatives have never been okay with the idea of queer people existing broadly, any of them. Historically speaking, if you look at conservative movements of the past, that is very clear. The history of hate crimes, industrialized killing of queer people in, you know, 1930s, 1940 Germany. It's very clear that the average conservative is not eliminationist in that way, but the people in power are. And the you know, the individual people might be as well, but like, if they're at that point already, like I said, they're just like a hop, skip, and jumping away from being like, oh, well, it's happening to them, so fuck it. It's not happening to me, Lamau. And it'll never end, by the way. Now, of course, the severity of which these opinions are held and the threat of power wielding it can change, and hopefully does, make it a lot harder for people to act on these bigoted beliefs. But it will never stop, because these people are also religious fundamentalists, right? It used to be, oh, well, you know, trans people don't exist because just because you change your name, your pronouns, and wear different clothing, like, that doesn't mean you're a woman or a man. Now you have medical intervention, where with HRT, you can actually start to pass a lot better outside of your genetics when it comes to passing or clock ability. So it's like, oh, well, now people can, like, look like it, so we're passing a little bit better. And also, biologically speaking, if you're on HRT long enough, your body will more visibly represent the gender you identify as if you're trans than it will your biological sex. And I should say the sex that correlates with the gender you're identifying as, at least in a binary capacity when it comes to trans women and trans men. It's almost like hormones are part of biology. Yeah. So then it's like, okay. And of course, like with gender affirming surgeries and all this kind of shit. Cause like, so like then it moved to, okay, well, you can't have you can't be a woman because you don't have a vagina, because conservatives love reducing women to just the genitals they have, because to the standard conservative, the standard Republican, women are meant to be like fucking baby factories or whatever insane shit they believe. So it's like, okay, well, now we have vaginoplasty and phalloplasty. So what now? Oh, well, you don't have a womb. Now we're seeing articles about potential womb transplants being possible. It's like, okay, well, what next? Well, you don't have a woman's soul. And I'm like, well, do you have that sounds like a bold empirical claim. Do you have a source that you can cite to justify that? And of course they don't, because you cannot possibly empirically define what a soul is and provide proof for it. That is impossible. That is why it is supernatural. You cannot prove it. That is the benefit that religion has. So it's like, okay, well then what now? Or I guess before the soul, it would be chromosomes, right? Well, if you've gotten a vaginoplasty, if you've gotten a transplant womb, you've been on HRT, blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't... What about your chromosomes? Well, if science finds a way to change your chromosomes, well then what then? You don't have a fucking woman's soul. You don't have a man's soul. It'll never stop. It does not end. They have no end point other than getting rid of queer people. That's the ultimate goal. That's the only thing that it can be. That's what all their rhetoric suggests. They simply do not want queer people to exist. The justifications change, the rhetoric changes, the talking points change, but the goal has always been the same. It has been the same throughout history. You also have to ignore people with unusual chromosomes. Yeah, like intersex people, or like abnormalities of hormones, of chromosomes of like cis women and cis men, which has happened. It does happen. It's not common, but it does happen. Literally doesn't matter, because as soon as conservatives run out of science arguments, they'll just return to God. Yep, and that's what they're doing. That's what a lot of the right-wing ideologues are doing as well. Because they're religious fundamentalists. That's quite literally what they're doing. They're saying it's an affront to God, God's design for the human body. Blah, 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 blah. Also, can I just say, I wasn't even looking, and I did this igloo movement. Like, I was looking at the game in my periphery, reading that message from Chicken Wing in the chat, and I actually did it. So, I mean, I'm goated. For real, no cap. On a stack. Just give me my world record. This video is kind of called as Cheetah. I really do appreciate the support, and especially appreciate you for being a constant fixture in my live stream chat, as you can see over here. If you'd like to be the next Connor Call, all you gotta do is follow me on Twitter at ConnorCC, retweet my video links when they go live. Remember to subscribe to the channel, put all notifications on, leave a like if you'd like. Comment something down below about how I forgot what this video is gonna be about. Transphobia is bad, and we should be nice to people. Have a good day.